What's up, guys? Today is a beautiful day to be out here working with the chainsaw. It's probably in the high 30s, almost no wind. Whoa, don't fall. Really happy to be out here. Just a little tiny bit wet, but not too soft to where we're gonna be getting all muddy. But like I said, today we're gonna be talking about deer bedding. Jeff posted, honestly, I think one of his best videos on bedding a few days ago. Truly enjoyed it. I suggest you go check that out if you haven't already. But I want to show you in relation to my property how that fits and what I'm going to be doing to improve things. So right here, I'm actually sitting on a finger of woods that sticks out into this field. And one of the main things, Jeff talks about, and the rest of us as habitat managers, is how we can utilize depth of cover to retain more deer on the property, but specifically mature bucks, right? If I have, I'll show you over here, woods in this direction, okay? I have this kind of open field. I have a little more woods and a couple peninsulas, and the majority of my food is that way, all right? I have some linear plots going to it, but the main source is over there where we kind of would consider that our holding plot, if you will. So if our food's over there and I have this big field, it's not super well established. You can see a couple pockets of switch that I have put in, but this is very mediocre soil. I want to say in the high fives, if you will, maybe not even that in some areas where it's super sandy. You can see this actually trail that I'm standing on was switch, and I did all the right methods, and it's still, of course, you have a little bit of blocking of sunlight on this peninsula and stuff like that, but it hasn't come in super well. I've also planted a couple hundred pines. They're scattered throughout. I can see a couple small ones there, just very thin. There's 3 right there. They haven't grown very well. I can see a few over there. The issue though is it is not good enough to hold deer and keep them bedding yet. So if no deer can bed here close in relation to this food source, well, what's the issue? If they can't bed here, they can bed right there, right? Well, if our first layer of doe bedding is this far, 300 yards, I'm wasting about half of my space for bucks to be able to relate to my food source. So I have my food, again, a lack of bedding, and then my woods, where now the doe will be relating. And if you've seen a lot of my videos earlier in the year, it's gotten better and better, and does are relating daily to the food sources, but they're coming out of, this specific area. I've worked hard on the area. It's done very well. But the goal being, we want to increase this so the does can move closer to the food source. Will allow more room for bucks here in the back to have their personal space. They can still all come out to the food together. I'm not saying you guys aren't going to see doe and bucks together. However, as far as bedding and living quarters go, they like to have their space. If there's too much social pressure, they're not just gonna lay right next to each other a lot of the time, which is mainly our depth of cover topic. So a couple things. Today, what we're gonna be focusing on is these trees, what we're gonna look at doing. And then later on, I'm gonna bring you back here in probably April. We're gonna have big rock trees, cuttings, all different sizes, different shrubs, different trees. The pockets that we're doing, and that a lot of the time we are talking to our clients about, how are we setting that up? What are some of the miscellaneous things like weed barriers or fencing it or not? But we'll get all into that another day. So today, my goal is to, I have high 30s into the low 40s. So some of these trees still have a little bit of the flex to it. So my plan is to do a lot of my edge feathering today. When it's colder, next month, whatever, I can drive back on the 4-wheeler. I can do a lot of my, just pure clear cut bedding areas where I want to just get a lot of side cover and get a lot of that sunlight in. When it's much colder, I'm not going to be hinging as much. But today it'll be a combination of hinging and flush cutting. And I know in my last video, that recap, I showed you guys a lot of the down trees right there. I'm gonna add to that a little bit. And then in this peninsula, along with some of the other border of the woods, towards the inner of my property, I'm going to be dropping and releasing. I have bur oak, white oak, a bunch of good trees in here that we want to release, be dropping the elm and the hickory and things like that, get them on the ground. And then what it's gonna allow is a lot of these briars and eastern red cedars that you see growing up right here. I'll give you a better look. I mean, these are natural. These aren't ones that, you know, I planted. And what'll happen is I'll start to see more and more of that as I get these edges feathered. And what I meant, if you didn't quite understand it in the last video, is when you have these down trees and it starts to thicken up and the side cover's in the way, the deer can't always nibble off the tops of everything that's coming up, that new growth, which is what we're trying to establish, right? Well, if they do that year after year, you know, within a year or two, right away, it's gonna stunt the growth, and a lot of that new growth will just die. So that's kind of the cool part of feathering edges. Plus it's allowing to create a kind of more of a natural barrier, right? We're gonna have some standing trees, some good oaks, added bedding, some down trees, some side covers, some briars, and then some field and some switchgrass and the different added pockets that we're gonna do in here. And then farther from that will be our food and our tree stands, of course, and kind of create that whole foundation of movement that's been getting better and better. So I'll try and bring you along. I'm out here, you know, alone, of course, and I'm gonna be cutting, making sure I identify the right trees to release and to cut, and kind of get to work. So I'll bring you as much footage as I can, maybe a couple other examples, but I want to make sure that you guys kind of understand the principle of this, why I'm doing it, when I'm doing it, when the temperature is a little warmer for anything that I'm gonna hinge cut, right? And that, you know, 4 maybe to 8 inch range, depending on the type of the tree, and kind of work my way down these edges for the best trees to cut. So stay with me and enjoy. All right, guys, so one of the first trees, or a couple trees I'm gonna be cutting, is this pretty much dead cherry, and a few of these elm over here. You can see they're kind of twisted. This one is pretty much already dead, so you need to be very careful cutting trees like that, just because they could go at any time. You don't really know how the core is. But you can also see over there, there's some tiny oaks mixed in. That other small tree is actually a really good scrape tree, if you can see that. And those are the ones I want to be keeping and releasing and letting them grow. In a couple years, depending on the size, they could be producing. So I'm going to be dropping these elm trees, this cherry tree. I'm going to be feathering the edges, and I'm also going to be releasing some of these, you know, much better trees that we want to keep with these other oaks to make this an inner hotspot once things take hold and we have other growth in these fields. And this is going to be a beautiful place in the middle. So I'm going to go ahead and get these down, but I thought that would be a good example. Here's another example, guys. You can see this group of 3 trees over here, 3 or 4, a couple of them oaks. You know, if you want to get good production and they're kind of sucking off of each other, wow. If you want to get the best, you know, mass production, what they call releasing a tree is simply removing some of the other trees that are competing, keep the best one, the straightest one, the most that would quote unquote have the best timber value. But a lot of those trees are also gonna, you know, again, produce the most. So it's okay to take out some of your good trees, your smaller trees, if they're in the way or competing too much and they're kind of junk. So just look for those. That's a good example. There's a cluster of oaks right here, and it's just not really necessary to have 6. I'd rather have, you know, 2, maybe 3, if I can, up to 10 feet apart potentially, and cut the rest. So we'll continue on. I don't know if you guys can see this tree right here, that tall break it had, and then the line down the tree. It's pretty much a straight up barber trayer. You know, comes from, well, many different cuts, but you guys got to remember, when you're not doing a face cut, you're doing a cut like a hinge. It's basically all pressure on one cut, and the tree can either lean the other way, which it shouldn't. If you're doing the right trees, you really want to go with the lean, especially for a hinge, make your life easier. Doesn't matter if you have a habitat hook or something like that, you're not gonna outmuscle these big trees, or a lot of the big trees if you're trying to do a 6-inch diameter, 8-inch, or excuse me, yeah, diameter tree. So be careful of that. I don't want you guys, I'm always, when I'm bringing people out here, they're helping me, or maybe someone's new with the chainsaw, or teaching them on a fly-in or something like that, right? Everyone's experience level is different. Do not just sit really close right to the back of the tree. Oh, you probably can't see that too well. Don't just stand back here and push with a habitat hook or your hand because you want it to lean a certain way over the other. Don't do that, because you have no idea when a tree is going to do that, and it's just going to come right at you in a split second. You'll have no time. I don't care how athletic you are, you know, and it'll take you out. So be very careful, please. Do not stand right behind the tree. Make your cut from the side and stay on the side. If you're using a habitat hook, you know, start real slow, put the hook up taller on the tree, and you should be quite a ways back, you know, with that habitat hook extended, pushing on the tree for leverage. You should not be right up against the back. Sometimes even when people are wedging, I think they're just being a little bit careless, just wedging and hitting and standing in the back of the tree when the majority of their body can easily be to the side. So something to think about, especially if you're like me, you're out here by yourself, wear your protective gear, chaps, all that good stuff. So anyways, just specific to hinging, I wanted to mention that. Quick break to refuel, maybe sharpen. As I'm making my way back to the ATV, just wanted to show you guys this is a perfect time to also take a look at you know, some of the things you planted in the winter where you can see a little better, but also when there's no snow, especially if you planted seedlings and stuff, they can be hard to see. These, I want to say, you can see are probably 2 years old now, maybe the first group of trees we planted. This one, I actually haven't seen too much of them getting messed with, but you can see that's actually definitely been rubbed on quite a bit, which kind of stinks because it was actually growing pretty decent. Hopefully he makes it. Still some growth down here, but the whole middle section is taken off. This one's not looking too bad. You can see new growth. And we pretty much planted a lot of these in like groups of 10. So here's one here. Honestly, that's probably, that might be some of last year's, these smaller ones. So I'm actually finding a good bit of them. There's another one. And another one. Wow, okay, so another one here. I'll stop doing that, but I'm pleasantly surprised just with this type of ground that we're on right now. You know, it used to be farmed, hasn't been farmed now in a couple of years, and you know, a lot of things were dried out. Definitely, like I was saying earlier, a little sandy and stuff, but to see some of these trees, you know, make it through the year doing pretty good, that makes me quite a bit happier. So when we come back again in April to do a lot of the cuttings and stuff, I want to make sure that you know, we aren't just going over these trees, but at the same time maybe even having a couple in the fence if we fence them off, which I'll show you. Wouldn't be a bad idea. Wow, I'm actually I'm really pleasantly surprised. I will try and remember the nursery. This was that joint order I did last year with one of our fellow YouTubers who has been reached out, and we've been in pretty good communication about things. And we kind of did like I said, a joint order, and those seems like they did very well. So I was getting a little pessimistic on them. But again, it's a good time for you to go take a look and see how well your own plantings are doing. Holy shit! I came over here to look at that tree, and that bunny took off, and I about had a heart attack right as I started this part of the video. So that's pretty cool. He's out here in the middle of the field. He was just tuckered right in there. I wanted to say, look at the growth on this, you know, the top of this pine. Each kind of break out of branches, guys, is typically a year of growth, even though the way I'm looking at these, I'm starting to question that a little bit. But anyway, what I wanted to say is the weeds are one of the main competitors, you know, to growth, right? We need water, we need sunlight, and we need as little competition as possible. So for these pines here, you know, even though they're going into 2 years, again, they probably barely you know, maybe grew a foot or so, look what they're competing with. They're competing with all this stuff in the fall and summer and everything. You know, this stuff is quite a bit taller and thicker, even though it doesn't stay too well from the soil. If you put down something, especially if you're going to buy more expensive cuttings instead of just seedlings, I think, again, if you've been following along, you've known some of these seedlings planting at 70 cents. You know, I try and pick good areas, but I wouldn't spend an additional, you know, day doing weed barrier or anything like that. I would just stick the seedlings in, stick them in pockets, and it looks like some of that's going to be paying off where there's enough sunlight and moderate soil. Maybe some of these areas are a little bit more moist than others. But at the same time, if you're worried or you're spending more money, focusing on those three things and maybe doing a little more weed prevention could do wonders for you. So I wanted to show you right here, guys, a switchgrass pocket that I did in one of the first years on the farm. It's not huge, I would say. I don't know, it's a 30 foot, maybe a little more, circle, a switch. And you can see over here, we have one of the borders with food on the other side, and then more switch on the other side of the food where I talked about mowing my access and walking through the switch on this side. Now here on the inner part, we actually don't have any more switch. We have a couple more pockets, if you can see that, which is great. And we're always talking to clients about, you know, the different ways to make substantial cover rather quickly. And, you know, years ago when I did this, the switchgrass seed was probably 10, 11 bucks a pound. Where now I believe you could still be sitting, you know, 17 to the low 20s per pound. It's, you know, double in price. But in doing a large area, and if you're going to spend the time spraying all the different sprayings into the second year as well, using Simazine only, you know, that's a lot of work, especially if you're doing quite a bit of plantings. And oftentimes, you know, identifying, I don't know if you can see some of the blue flags right there, identifying where you've sprayed, because think about it, you're frost seeding, it's winter time, right? There's no snow, but then you could have a bunch of freeze frost, you could have snow falling, you come back to spray a month later and then 2 months later or whatever it's going to be. It can be hard to identify and then deal, where is your pockets? Are you spraying in the right area? Are you using a backpack sprayer or maybe a wand off of a, you know, ATV or UTV spreader? So one way to do it is that way, and creating these pockets. And then again, this is kind of also where not only am I doing some edge feathering, but I'm also going to be doing additional planting. So I have Norway spruce out here, and then I'm going to also be putting some of the different hybrid poplar and maybe willow, and then some of the shrubs like silky willow, dapple willow, things like that. So that is the one way. The other way is to just do a bigger planting of switch and then taking sections of it out. It's tough because yes, you're kind of wasting money, and yes, right, the deer aren't eating switch. So if you're doing too much of it, the reasons we have some of this natural is because the deer then also have natural browse to go with where they're bedding, which is very important. So to put in a bunch of switch and then take, you know, a third of it or more or whatever out, you know, is also a little bit of a negative side. So both of those ways are something for you to think about. We talk about both ways with clients, and a lot of times it just depends on the property, of course, resources and stuff like that, and equipment, and what people prefer to do. So walked around, found some more of the trees on this side, found a couple of the bigger ones where the deer are rubbing. I thought I would get away with deer rubbing less of the Norway spruce, and maybe I have, but they definitely have, you know, shredded a few. So enjoying it, gonna finish cutting. I think that's about it for today, guys. We're not gonna do any more of the cutting in the back until, again, things are frozen. We'll do more flush cuts, and we're still doing some flush cuts, but being a warmer day, it's nice to do a little bit of hinging. Have a great weekend. Enjoy the football games, depending on when I get this out. Go Georgia and Michigan, depending on who's watching this. And we will see you guys next time. If you're enjoying following along, please think about subscribing, liking this video, and we'll see you next time. What happened in here?